Hey there, fellow knowledge seekers. It's time for another deep dive, and you know me, always digging into the big questions. Today, it's one that's probably crossed all of our minds at some point. What's it all about? What's the point of it all?
Uh, yeah, the age-old search for meaning. We've been asking that question for what feels like forever.
And honestly, we're better to look for answers or at least some thought-provoking insights than the Book of Ecclesiastes.
Right?
We're diving into excerpts from chapter 2, where he really gets into the nitty-gritty of pleasure, wealth, wisdom, and whether any of it truly satisfies. Especially because, let's face it, life has an expiration date.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how those themes they just keep coming up no matter what time period, what culture you look at.
It's like that universal human experience. You look at your life maybe after you had a tough day and think, is this it? What am I even doing here?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And Ecclesiastes doesn't shy away from those big questions.
He really doesn't know.
He dives right in saying, okay, I'm going to figure this whole meaning of life thing out. And he's like, you know what? Let's start with the fun stuff. Good food, good wine, good company, indulging in every pleasure you can imagine.
Yeah, the ultimate test, right? If anyone's gonna find happiness and pleasure, it would be a king like Solomon. Although, spoiler alert, even that gets old for him.
Yeah. It's like, been there, done that, didn't really fulfill me the way I thought it would. He starts to realize that chasing after pleasure, it's a lot like trying to catch the wind.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about how that same idea plays out in our lives today. Like, think about social media, right? This constant need for more likes, more followers. It's the same cycle of chasing after fleeting satisfaction.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Or even just buying something new, like the latest gadget, and then,
The excitement fades.
yeah, fades super quick.
It's that hedonic treadmill, right? You get a little rush, but then you need more and more to get the same feeling. But Ecclesiastes, he's like, okay, so maybe it's not just about instant gratification. Maybe it's about building something that lasts. So what does he do? He goes all in on wealth and accomplishment. We're talking huge houses, sprawling gardens, more possessions than one person could ever need.
The man built himself an empire.
He did.
But even surrounded by all that opulence and success, he still feels this emptiness inside.
It's almost like he's saying it doesn't matter what you have or what you achieve, there's still something missing.
Exactly. He uses these really powerful words to describe it, like vanity, chasing after the wind. What a reality check.
Those descriptions, they really hit you, don't they? And I think it speaks to a really universal human experience. It's not that wealth or success are bad in and of themselves, but Ecclesiastes, he's wrestling with this idea that no matter how much we accumulate, it doesn't really address that deeper longing for meaning.
Okay, so if material comforts and earthly delights aren't doing the trick, where does he go from there? Because I have a feeling Ecclesiastes isn't the kind of guy to just throw in the towel.
No, he doesn't give up easily, does he? He's like, all right, on to plan C. Let's see if wisdom holds the key to this whole meaning of life thing. And you can almost feel this glimmer of hope in his words. Like, maybe, just maybe, knowledge and understanding will unlock the secrets to a truly meaningful life.
Right. It's like he sees wisdom as this light shining through the darkness, offering a clearer path. But then reality seems to hit him pretty hard.
Yeah, he realizes that even wisdom, as amazing as it can be, it can't change the fact that we all die.
Right.
He even says, the wise person has eyes in their head, but the fool walks in darkness.
Okay.
But then he follows that up with, the same fate overtakes them both.
So what's the point?
Exactly. It's like all of his striving, all of his searching, it leads him to this realization that ultimately death comes for us all.
And that's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. He even asks, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so wise?
I feel like that's such a human response, like we put in all this effort, we try to do things right, we learn and grow, and then we're faced with the fact that it might not change the ultimate outcome. It's kind of a downer.
Yeah, it can be. And Ecclesiastes, he really leans into that feeling of despair in this part of the text.
Yeah, he doesn't try to sugarcoat it.
No, he doesn't. In fact, he
Uh-huh.
goes on to say something that's, well, let's just say it's not going to be on any motivational posters anytime soon.
Yeah, he gets pretty real, pretty dark. This is where he comes right out and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, I hate life.
Yeah, not exactly the kind of statement you expect from a book of wisdom, right?
It's kind of a downer.
It is. But you know what? I think that's part of what makes Ecclesiastes so powerful. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions, the uncomfortable questions about life and death and what it all means. He's not going to give us some easy answers or pretend that life is always sunshine and rainbows. He's grappling with some real raw emotions here.
And we have to remember, This isn't just some angsty teenager going through a phase. This is a king, a man who had it all, wealth, power, you name it, and he's still wrestling with these big questions.
Exactly. He's speaking from a place of deep experience, having seen and done it all, and that makes his words hit even harder, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Mm.
Especially when you consider the cultural context of his time. Inheriting wealth, it wasn't just about being rich, it was seen as a sign of God's blessing.
Right.
Like if you were wealthy, it meant you were living a good life, a life that was favored by God.
It was a really big deal.
But even with all of that, even with the security and the status that came with inheriting wealth, Ecclesiastes still finds himself feeling empty and disillusioned.
It's almost as if he's saying, what's the point of building all of this, of accumulating all of this wealth, if I can't take it with me when I die?
And he pretty much says just that. He says, I hated all my toil in which I toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? All that work, all that effort, and in the end, we have to leave it all behind.
It really makes you think about what's truly important in life, doesn't it?
It does, and that's where Ecclesiastes, even in the midst of all this despair, he offers a surprising twist.
So where do we go from here? It seems like he's hit rock bottom, right? Tried everything, questioned everything, and now he's facing this void of meaning. But then, almost out of nowhere, he says this: there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil.
It's like this unexpected turn, isn't it? After all that wrestling and struggling, he arrives at a place of, well, I don't know if I'd call it optimism, but maybe a kind of acceptance. Like, maybe the answer isn't some big revelation, but just finding a way to appreciate the simple things.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, I've looked into the abyss, and let me tell you, it's not about building monuments or chasing after things you'll eventually leave behind. Enjoy that good meal. Appreciate the work you do. Find those moments of joy in the everyday. That's where you find a little bit of peace.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that? It's not about ignoring the hard stuff. He's not saying, just pretend death doesn't exist and everything's going to be fine. He's acknowledging the reality that life is fleeting.
He actually uses the word vanity to describe it.
Right, like it's all a bit of a vapor, here 1 minute and gone the next. But even within that, there's this weird sort of freedom.
It's like you can't control the wind, but you can learn how to adjust your sails.
Exactly. And maybe that's the key to navigating this whole existence thing, right? We can drive ourselves crazy trying to find some ultimate meaning in a universe that might not even care if we're here or not. Or we can focus on what we can control, how we treat other people, the effort we put into our work, those little moments of joy we can find amidst the chaos.
So after this deep dive into, well, one man's existential crisis, what are we left with? If even wisdom and wealth couldn't deliver on the promise of ultimate meaning for Ecclesiastes, where do we go from here?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if you ask me, I don't think there's one right answer for everyone. But, maybe Ecclesiastes would say the answer isn't really the point. Maybe it's more about wrestling with those questions, about embracing both the beauty and the fragility of life, and finding those little pockets of peace and joy along the way. Even, or maybe especially, in the face of knowing that it doesn't last forever.
A lot to think about there. Big thanks to our expert for unpacking all of that timeless wisdom and, let's be honest, a healthy dose of existential angst that we find in Ecclesiastes.
Always a pleasure to dive into these big questions.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those aha moments that make life, in all its messy glory, a little bit brighter.